Hello, this is Sabrina with Young's Daughters Funeral Home and Bereavement Center. This video is with New Century Hospice, and we have Richard Rodriguez and Jordan Corey with us. Richard, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and your company?
Hi, good morning. My name is Richard Rodriguez. I am a executive hospice care consultant for New Century Hospice. I have my license in vocational nursing, and I've been with New Century Hospice and in this role for over 3.5 years.
And my name is Jordan, and I am an RN, and I'm the Director of Operations with New Century, the Harker Heights location with Richard. And I've been with the company now 6 years and 4 years as the director.
Right. Well, I am so truly blessed to have you both and to get out the education that we're going to put out today. So thank you so much for joining.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So I'm going to go through a series of questions, and the first one is going to be, when admitted to hospice, what are some funeral-related questions that you ask your families?
So when I meet with families, sometimes I do get a lot of questions on, what do we do when the time comes for a funeral home calling? What arrangements do you guys have? And what we usually do is we give them information on what funeral homes are in the community. We ask questions like, do you have final arrangements already made? Some of them do not. We ask them, not to try to get into their finances, but what are you looking for? And when it comes to funeral arrangements, do you need assistance with that? Do you need affordable type of services? Are you looking for cremation? Are you looking for, we try to get their information and then lead them in the kind of direction that, because of working with the community, lead them in the direction that they need to get those answers or to get that help that they need.
Great. And since death is kind of an elephant topic, what are some techniques that you use to introduce the idea of end-of-life planning?
So with my experience, what I've learned is I ask the patients or the families that I meet with, what have the doctors told you? What have you learned from your primary care physician? And that kind of sets the groundwork on where what position I need to take. Is it going to be more of an education, or yes, they understand where they're at in their disease process, and then kind of go from there. Usually it's just a lot of questions to try to see where they're at, not only about where they're at physically with their health and where they're at for the eligibility for hospice, but also are they mentally prepared for that service. And that usually the mental preparedness for that, what it means to be on hospice, that's the biggest hurdle that we deal with on a day-to-day basis with patients.
So hospice is a pretty scary word for most people. They know that the time is short. So when you deal with families, how do you alleviate that fear, knowing, or starting that first relationship?
Again, what I do, and Jordan can answer this as well, but for me, what I do is when I meet with families, I ask them, what are your expectations? Yes, you've been referred for a consultation for hospice, and we need to see if you're eligible. That's kind of the first step. But what are your goals as dealing with your disease process? What do you want? What are your wishes? And 9 times out of 10, families will verbatim tell me exactly what hospice is, without even knowing that the word hospice is scary. That's what they're focused on, is that word. But when you start breaking it down and saying, well, what are your goals? What are your goals when it comes to comfort care? What are your goals for your disease process? Some families, I've had patients and families say, we're done going to the hospital. We don't want to be poked and prodded anymore. I'm tired of going to the ER every weekend, every third day, just for them to stabilize me and send me home. I just want to be comfortable. I want to be home. I want to be with my family. I want to be pain-free, anxiety-free. And those are all things related to hospice. That's what we do. And so 9 times out of 10, once we kind of break down that word hospice and find out what their goals are, then we can see if they align with what the philosophy of hospice is.
So with the shelter in place, how do you find that your patients are coping right now? Like, I have a lot of families that are in fear with, bringing in a home health agency or hospice right now because they think that they're going to be limited on who can come to the home or who can go to the nursing facilities. How are the families coping with that aspect?
So at this point, I would say communication for us is number one in trying to alleviate that anxiety that the family may have. For especially the families that live out of town, a lot of times the hospice staff is that link that they have to contact with their family and to get updates. And so all of our disciplines are making routine phone calls, just keeping them in the loop as kind of that bridge between wherever the patient lives, whether it's home or in a facility, and then with the family. But we're also at one point at the mercy of the facility's protocols as well, whether they'll allow our staff, and if they do, how often. So it's just reassuring everybody that if our staff can't go, we're making weekly phone calls. The nurses are calling several times a week to get report and then relaying that report to the family so that they get some peace of mind that we're still keeping in touch and monitoring that patient. We have done several, the nurses and other staff have done several FaceTime meetings with the family from the bedside. For those facilities where they're allowing the hospice staff in, but no family visitors, so that they can at least just lay eyes on mom and know that, okay, I can see her, I'm okay now.
So some of the families that I deal with, of course, they call me when they want to start pre-planning their arrangements or they know they found out that they are ill. And some of the families I know that they are ill, but there's the fear of they don't want to have home regulations. And they say, oh, Sabrina, I'm just going to do flu medicine. I'm going to do Tylenol 3. We're going to manage it on ourselves. What is your best response to that right now? So are you regulating people in their own homes?
So, our staff is basically the same. So a patient's going to have an assigned care team. That's going to be the same nurse that comes. So from that aspect, we do limit the number of staff that it's exposed in the patient's home. It's the same team, so to speak, that follows that patient. But we're kind of following along with the family. So if it's the family's comfort to only allow telehealth visits temporarily, then that's what we'll accommodate. Our staff is following the current PPE protocols that are coming down, which changes so regularly. But
so
we're
not hindering families from visiting family in person at the home.
No, but for our staff's safety, and then of course for the safety of other patients, we do have some pre-screening that we ask the families before making in-home visits. As far as fever, have you been exposed to anybody who may or have tested positive? So just the basic screening questions to kind of lay some groundwork before people were to enter the home.
Good, because that's very reassuring that families are still able to visit and still be bedside. I know that's definitely a question that keeps popping up for me. So we're bringing families together from afar through, you mentioned tablets, Wi-Fi platforms, through the nursing homes and assisted livings, and at home, we're able to FaceTime. And so we are really overcoming the challenge is what I hear on your guys' end, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, ma'am.
So speaking about your hospice, do you have bereavement support groups? How do you help families that are the survivors?
So our bereavement program is 13 months after the time of passing. So it's called, we refer to it as the year of firsts. So first birthdays, first holidays, first any type of commemorative event that the family is now going to be doing for the first time without that loved one present. And then open for one-on-one bereavement counseling with the bereavement coordinator via phone or at-home appointment, or in the office appointments, as well as bereavement mailings. So some resources on how to cope and tips and tricks kind of stuff. And then we also do a monthly support group at the office here that is open to the community as well.
Great. Well, that's wonderful that you have actual in-office support.
Yes.
Very needed. So do you see at times where there's an influx of a lot of people coming and then it goes away? What do you see on your support groups?
It's pretty inconsistent, but I would say the one consistency is it tends to be the spouses of patients who had a very sudden decline in death. They were doing okay, and then an acute event happened that they just weren't able to recover from. And so the family wasn't able to have that time to get their head and hands around what was going on and having that time to do their pre-bereavement and their pre-grief before the actual time of passing.
Yeah. So will you, in the future, possibly have pre-bereavement support where you're helping them be a caregiver? Do you offer classes that way?
We don't have a formal class, so to speak, but all of our patients, families, or caregivers have a pre-bereavement and grieving risk tool done at the time of admission. And so part of the social worker and chaplain, part of their role is to work through those end of life grief issues as the patient's on service with us.
Great. So I know with our bereavement center, my goal was the families are already grieving. We call it the pre-bereavement rate. And the time where they know they have to give up their life to start caring for somebody, they are transitioning their careers. They have to maybe scale back. They have to take on a whole new role as a caregiver. So that transition is we see as very burdensome at times, and they need that scapegoat or how to cope with their new job per se. So with the bereavement center, we do want to partner with hospices to start having these classes to allow everybody who is becoming a caregiver, whether you're a grandchild caring for a grandparent or a parent caring for an adult child that's sick, we want to have collective classes. So hopefully that's something that we can partner in the future with. And
absolutely,
because it is, you see them in the nursing homes, and you'll see little signs that says, does your loved one have Alzheimer's and you need the help? Well, the thing is they're not promoted, and so we want to bring those classes to a central location where if you're in that transition place, this is a place you go to learn, right? So that's our hope with the bereavement center, and I hope with our partnership here in the future we'll be able to accomplish that. So you mentioned about your first years of firsts. I really love that. Do you do anything else, like any special events in the Harker Heights community, or have a walk to remember, or a yearly celebration, or memorial services?
Yes, we have an annual memorial service for our staff, as well as for the families or caregivers, friends, whoever of the patients who've been on service that have passed since the last memorial. And we light a candle for every patient. The staff a lot of times will add a comment or something that they remember about taking care of that patient, and we do get a lot of families that come back for that. But we do also have several people from the community that come just to be, I think, in that supportive environment that's safe to have grief.
Sabrina, we also have had families that we've taken care of their loved one and they've passed, and those family members feel like giving back and helping hospice, and so they become volunteers for us, and so they give back to the community by going and visiting our current patients that are on hospice, whether they be in the facility or at home, just to give them that again, support and let them know that someone's there. It gives the family a little bit of what's the word I'm looking for?
Comfort.
Comfort, knowing that someone else is coming to visit them, so that they, someone else is being able to put eyes on them and make sure they're okay.
I agree 110% with that. I think utilizing those that are walking that grief path can certainly help others. And with grief, no one should walk that alone. I do believe that we need to collectively walk together, because it's something that you just have to adjust to walk, right? Because they've imprinted that much on our lives, and it's very important that we recognize that. And if we can put our grievers together and to work together, I can't tell you how tremendously healing. I know through even volunteering, it was kind of a humble story. I think I told you, I came back, I started at New Century Hospice, and I was doing nursing, and I was going to be a hospice nurse. And then I realized that was not my path, right? And so volunteering, I saw firsthand experience how important it was. You guys got me CPR certified. I was out there visiting people, and I loved every day of being a volunteer. I really did, because there was this little lady, I remember, I got to share this story real quick. She would argue with me every day that I visited, and she just had to be right. And everything in her room had to be the way she wanted. And so I would purposely come, and I'm ready and feisty to argue with this woman. And we enjoyed our conversations. And she was like, I would ask her, do you want to play cards today? No, I don't want to play no cards with you. And I said, well, I don't want to play cards with you either, but I offered, and we just had a great time. So volunteering through your establishment was amazing. So thank you so much for being my stepping stone.
Thank you.
Yeah. So something that came up during the quarantine was families were afraid to call the funeral home because they didn't want to not have a funeral service. And so over the years, I've noticed that chaplains would go to the bedside, and they do a small ceremony already at the bedside. They let them, kind of have some hands-on approach, maybe helping them dress or closing them out, or even just letting them be where they are, and then they just kind of have a small ceremony at the bedside. Is that something that you've done during the quarantine time frame, is maybe having that bedside service before they go for their final disposition?
We have not encountered that at this point. I think at least the majority of our patients are facility residents, and the family a lot of times is unfortunately not able to be there. And so we haven't run into that yet, but even prior to the quarantine, at the time of passing, our staff's going to make a visit and allow the family, if they say, we have somebody coming in from Austin, can you give us an hour before you call the funeral home? And we'll try and meet them where they're at, so long as realistically we can make it happen, giving the family an extra half hour and our staff stepping out and letting them, have that final time together before the funeral home comes.
So do you see any problems with funeral homes in the Bell County area with that time lapse of transportation?
We're at their mercy of availability. And so sometimes when we call the funeral home, they'll say, we have a driver that's already in the area doing another pickup. They'll be there in a half hour. And then other times they're going to say, we're really busy today, or we only have one driver and we're not going to be there for another 2.5 hours. So, once the family is ready, then that's when we will reach out to the funeral home.
Okay, great. And that's highly respectable, because a lot of people that are nurses that are pronouncing the time of death, and they call us right away and the family's not ready, so we're dispatching and having to wait. I do know that all the funeral homes, mostly in the Bell County area, are corporate owned. The Harper Tolosik groups are Legacy Funeral Group, and the Crawford Bowers are SCI. You have Crotty near you guys, and so they're family owned. And then our establishment and Hewitt Arney are private families. And so I know that some funeral homes utilize a third-party mortuary service, and so it kind of bogs down the time frame of that removal. So Our goal is to definitely have our own transportation team. So when we're called, we have our own transport. So we don't have to wait on whose funeral home is in line for the pickups and transfers. So that's just something to keep in mind if transportation's a little.
Yeah, definitely the family owned ones are much quicker. We've definitely seen that to be true.
So I'm a veteran, and we are a proud veteran establishment. Is there anything that you would offer or you do for veterans within your hospice group?
So we as well have several veterans that are employed here, nurses, chaplain, and then several military spouses as well. So it's something that definitely is kind of near and dear to our team. And we do a lot of work with the VA hospice patients as well. And so I think for the vets, it's the extra little attention to detail and giving them that, asking the questions about their service and time of service, and giving them the opportunity to talk about it if they want to. Letting the funeral home know at the time of passing that, hey, this was a vet, so that they can drape a flag over the casket when they the gurney when they remove it. And then we have a part of a program through our parent company called We Honor Vets. And so that's something we could coordinate to get you the information for. We have several handouts for that as well.
Right. So some hospices have done things at the bedside before the actual passing to show appreciation to the veteran. Maybe they have a crochet group and they do a red, white, and blue blanket, or they give them a certificate of appreciation or a pin. Is there anything like that you do for them while they're
we have historically done like the American flag pins for the vets, especially on Veterans Day, Memorial Day, those kinds of holidays, doing a special flag where our staff will deliver something for them and get like a photo release signed so that we can send the family maybe a picture or something like that.
That's wonderful. Some are extremely humble with their service time, and they say they don't want the flag or they say they don't want the pin, but it means the world to them. And I'm glad to see that you're acknowledging that, because it's very humbling to see.
We also have helped families in the past. Sometimes they don't tap into the resources or don't know about some of the resources that they could get through the VA system. And so our social worker helps with that and gets information and then tries to help get that, what they need from the VA, if there is time for that as well.
And it's very important to have that veteran relationship with your social worker relationship, because many people don't know that when it comes to signing the death certificate, we have to, in order to collect the insurance for the survivor, that it reads it on the death certificate. So do you have that protocol in place already? Do you already know what their disabilities are so you can put them on the death certificate?
Sometimes it's real easy. The referral comes from the VA and it's all listed nicely in their H&P, their service connection and all of that. I would say that 95% of the time, the reason that's bringing them to hospice is related to their service connection. But if not, and we know that the family is dependent on that benefit, believe it or not, the family is pretty forthcoming at the time of passing to say like, hey, this needs to be listed, because if not, we're going to lose, the benefits that we've had. And so I think that's just something that open communication, but I would say most of the time we have it, going into it, is related.
Great. But yeah, a lot of times when it comes to the arrangement time and I meet with the family, they always say, Sabrina, make sure this is on the death certificate. So my goal is just to educate all the doctors that are signing death certificates to know please put that on there. Look at the DD-214 or look at their release documents. Know what needs to be on, so that way, because it takes, with a new system with death certificates on our end, just so you're educated, it is nearly months to get that adjusted for the family. So we want to make sure it's done, and educating the doctors to put it on there first thing.
Well, speaking of death certificates too, with the new system, I think that a lot of families will ask the funeral home, how long is it going to take? And they'll say, well, we've sent it to the doctor today. Well, it's not instantaneous on our end either. And so we will get families like 2 days after passing, I'm still waiting for the death certificate. Okay, well, the doctor hasn't got it yet. So as soon as we get it, we will. But then it has to go back to the state before, it has to be approved before the funeral home can get it too. So I think one way of alleviating that from the funeral home end is to reassure them that it's a government process, so it's going to take some time, and just be patient, but we will get it done.
Yeah.
It's not, I know it's electronic, but it is not instant.
Right. Yep. So that's our protocol. We always say it takes about 2 to 3 weeks. If it comes faster, that's wonderful. But with the new system that we're all having to merge to and get doctors on, it does take a little bit more time.
Yeah.
Well, wonderful. Let's see. So the last one is, if you were inventing the bereavement center yourself, what would you envision it to be?
Oof. I could say one thing that I've been asked a lot about, and we do have some resources, but I think it's something that the community really needs to focus on a little more, is on the youth. Because we are seeing a lot of patients that are much younger in age that are having these terminal illnesses, and they have children. And so for them to have something that they could go to or spend some time at to get some bereavement assistance would be something I'd like to see.
Yeah.
For the youth.
Yeah, I think that's really the big hurdle probably for everybody, is it's not as black and white with children and maturity and age and what they can understand and all of that. So I definitely agree with Richard that I think focusing on the 18 or even 25, in all honesty, and under, that maybe don't have the life skills yet to navigate it on their own.
Exactly. I agree. I have 5 daughters, and they all go so differently.
All daughters?
All daughters. That's where the name of Young's Daughters comes from. I said, if I'm the first daughter, I'm not the daughter, I'm the mother, but one of these daughters got to take it over. So figured I'd include them all in there.
Awesome.
But yes, we will have youth. We actually have a youth camp that they can come to yearly.
Awesome.
And there's a sibling camp. So if you've lost a sibling, it's parents who've lost children, and then so it's kind of like, it's a family dynamic. It's underneath Compassionate Friends chapter. We house the Bluebonnet chapter at the bereavement center, and we've had different meetings in other places. But the Compassionate Friends is a beautiful resource. The yearly conference is where you get the most healing, I would say. You bring your entire family, and you go and you spend the weekend honoring your loved one. We print t-shirts that says the legacy, the stories on the back. We generate those pins that, you would have the loved one's name on it and their age and birth date and passing date. And then every time you tell the story, you pass the pin along. So everybody puts all these pins on their bodies, and the weight of grief is so heavy that the world has no idea how much they're bearing. So you pin all these different people on you, and by the end of the day, you're like, holy cow, because there's tens of thousands of people that go to this, and you get all these people, and you get to share all these stories on you physically, and it's so heavy, but it's so amazing to walk with. You don't realize how much grief is out there, and until you're wearing it, it's a mind hitter, right?
Yeah.
So I want to bring these concepts to Temple and the Bell County area, where I will partner with a Parks and Rec And then we put signs of all the different hospices collectively and all the different, anybody who's in grief, you can buy a $5 or $10 sign with your loved one's name and picture, and we walk the entire pathway of our Bell County area. I think seeing that on a large scale for our community to say, hey, we are all in it together. There's no hiding in your house with the dark sheets anymore. It's not something, I mean, everybody's grieving in their own way, whether they're making arts and crafts or they're, you know, pottery or building jewelry or stitching something together. I think if we can find, you know, bereavement leaders to, I can't even staple things together. Like, I'm the worst at crafting. So I need to find good crafters to bring these ideas together. And my class will be taping stuff together. I can do that. But just having all of these, you know, groups together, I think is going to be amazing. And
yes, it sounds wonderful. You know,
or if you staple yourself, you should definitely come in.
I think too, with us our such close proximity to Fort Hood, we do get calls occasionally for, you know, a soldier's family who's local, or some kind of outreach from Fort Hood as well. And so they may definitely be interested in partnering with you in this.
Wonderful. Is there any other questions that you guys have for me? I know we're coming up on time, so I just wanted to give you guys a platform to see if you have any questions.
So my question was, how did you get involved in, you know, become a director? You mentioned earlier a little bit about being a nurse or going to school to be a nurse. How did that come about? Well,
it was, my patients were passing away and I knew it was inevitable, and I wanted to handhold the families and give them more a personal approach. And when I met a funeral director that was coming to pick up the patient, and I said, what do you guys actually do? They said, oh, Sabrina, we just serve the families. And I said, that's it, sign me up, forget graduation as a nurse. And I immediately transferred over to become a funeral director. And I was about to walk on stage from UMHB as a hospice nurse. And nope, so I transferred to UCO in Oklahoma and got my bachelor's in mortuary science and grief and loved it. Every day I wake up just stupidly excited about it. So I knew that was my calling.
Wow.
That's amazing.
That is amazing.
And then seeing all the community, I said, we got to have a centralized platform where everybody can go. It can't just be my funeral home that I was working at, because everybody was grieving. So when the opportunity came and people started donating and people really supported the idea, they said, Sabrina, we'll help you. You know, we'll send our church. We need more grief. And it, you know, with God's blessing, it came out. So just keep watching the videos. Make sure you see us on Facebook and watch the videos.
Okay, absolutely.
Well, thank you guys so much. I do appreciate having
you.
Yeah, thank you for having us anytime.
Yeah, anytime.